Welcome to our channel. The Williamson estate glittered under the vast Texas sky, each of its many windows blazing with festive light, a modern mansion masquerading as a grand old manor. John Garrett felt as out of place as a bull in a china shop, his large frame feeling constricted and awkward among the polished guests. He stood on a sprawling stone terrace, overlooking a meticulously landscaped garden, a half-empty glass of whiskey. One hand, his worn cowboy had a familiar weight in the other, the rough wool of his brown coat was a shield against the sea of tailored tuxedos and shimmering designer dresses. At 42 he commanded one of the most successful horse ranches in Texas, a sprawling kingdom of dust and sky, but a high society Christmas party was a foreign and hostile territory. He'd come alone, a fact that seemed to amplify the festive cheer of the couples laughing and mingling. Inside, it had been 3 years since the divorce, 3 years of pouring every ounce of himself into the ranch, the one thing he was sure would never leave him. He told himself it was enough. Tonight, surrounded by so much polished joy, he knew it was a lie. He was just about to call it a night when he saw him, Jesse Thorne. His hand froze the glass halfway to his lips. 3 years had passed, but time had only refined Jesse's features, sanding away the last vestiges of the younger man John had married. He was standing near a towering, ornately decorated Christmas tree in the grand ballroom, a soft forest green sweater fitting him in a way that made him look comfortable and effortlessly elegant. A soft smile played on his lips as he listened to his host, the same one that used to make John's heart seize in his chest. A wave of memory, potent and painful, washed over him. Late nights talking by the fire, lazy Sunday mornings, the easy way Jesse's hand used to fit in his. Then the memory shattered. It wasn't just Jesse that made John's blood run cold. It was the two small boys standing beside him, their small hands clutching his. They were dressed in matching red Christmas sweaters, bright as holly berries against the muted tones of the party. Two identical faces, two mops of unruly dark hair, and two pairs of intense, curious blue eyes. John's eyes. He felt the air leave his lungs, the sound of a string quartet fading to a dull roar in his ears. They were perfect miniature versions of himself, right down to the stubborn set of their little jaws. He did the math, a frantic, desperate calculation in his head. The boys looked to be about 5 years old, a timeline that aligned perfectly, terrifyingly, with their separation. He set his whiskey down on the terrace railing with a thud that went unheard in the den. He put his hat on, not as an affectation, but as an act of steadying himself, of becoming the man he was supposed to be. He moved back inside, each step heavy as he navigated the crowded room, moving as if pulled by an invisible, unbreakable string. As he drew closer, Jesse looked up, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on John. His smile vanished, his eyes widened, color draining from his handsome face. He whispered something to the boys, who turned in unison to stare at the tall man in the cowboy hat approaching them. The sight of two Identical pairs of eyes, his eyes, examining him with pure childlike curiosity, made his steps falter for a fraction of a second. One of the boys, his red sweater adorned with a smiling snowman, tugged on Jesse's sleeve. "Daddy, who's that man?" The other, whose sweater featured a reindeer with a slightly lopsided nose, tilted his head. "He looks like us." John stopped a few feet from them, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He took off his hat again, holding it in both hands. "Jesse," he managed, his voice a low gravel he barely recognized. "We need to talk." Jesse straightened his shoulders, his hands resting protectively on the boy's red sweatered shoulders. "John, I was wondering when this day would come." "Are they?" John couldn't finish the question. The word hours was a ghost on his tongue, a dream he'd long since buried. The answer was right there, staring back at him twice over. "Yes," Jesse answered simply, his voice tight with an emotion John couldn't decipher. "This is Liam and this is Oscar." Before another word could be spoken, a man in an impeccably tailored suit materialized at Jesse's side, placing a possessive hand on his arm. "Jesse, darling, is there a problem? Your friend seems a bit lost." His gaze swept over John's brown coat and dusty boots with thinly veiled disdain. Before Jesse could answer, Liam pointed a small finger directly at John. "Daddy?" he asked again, his voice carrying in the brief lull in conversation. "Who is he?" The man's perfectly styled smile faltered. He looked from the boy's inquisitive face to John's rugged, shell-shocked one, the striking resemblance suddenly impossible to ignore. Comprehension followed by suspicion dawned in his cold eyes. "What is this?" he demanded, his grip on Jesse's arm tightening. John ignored him completely. His world had shrunk to the three people standing before him. He gestured towards a quieter adjoining library, its walls lined with leather-bound books. "Can we?" he asked, his voice low. Jesse gave a curt nod and guided the boys. The other man introduced curtly as Darwin trailed behind them like a storm cloud. John sat his hat on a polished mahogany table, the scent of old paper and leather stark contrast to the cloying perfume of the party. Two identical faces in matching red sweaters stared up at him, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "Why didn't you tell me, Jewel?" John's voice was low, laced with the raw pain of 3 years of silence. Using the old pet name was a mistake. Slip into a past that felt both lifetime ago and terrifyingly present. "I tried," Jesse replied, his arms crossed over his chest, a defensive posture. "After the divorce was finalized, I called the ranch more times than I can count. Your foreman always said you weren't available. I sent 3 letters, certified mail. They were all returned unopened." John's jaw tightened. He remembered that dark whiskey-soaked year after Jesse had left, a self-imposed exile where he burned every bridge back to the world, back to his heart. He told his foreman to turn everyone away, to return all mail. He wanted to be in island. He hadn't realized he was abandoning his own sons in the process. "I didn't know," he whispered, the words tasting like ash. They're adopted, Jesse said, the words rushing out as if to staunch a wound. I finalized it a year after we separated. We had started the process together. Remember before everything, I just continued it on my own. The agency, they said their file was a strong match for my profile. The resemblance is just a coincidence. Nature's little joke, I suppose. Coincidence, a joke. John ran a hand through his hair, the explanation doing little to quell the storm inside him. Joke, Jesse, they have my eyes, my hair, look at them. I would have helped. You know that, would you have? Jesse's eyes flashed with the fire. Clay remembered so well. You made it very clear during our divorce that the ranch was your life, your legacy. There wasn't room for anything else. For me, the accusation hit its mark, stinging with a truth John couldn't deny. He had chosen the land, the legacy, the solitude. He had been a fool. Daddy, I'm hungry, interrupted Liam, tugging at Jesse's green sweater. A small commotion drew their attention. The boys, having slipped away for a moment, had returned from a nearby dessert table, their faces and the front of their red sweaters now smudged with green and red frosting. In that moment of pure childish messiness, John's world shrank to these two children, his children, not by blood, but by a fate so uncanny it had to mean something. A family he never knew he had was standing right in front of him, covered in frosting. Oscar, the quiet one, with the reindeer sweater, stepped forward. He held up a slightly crumpled napkin. On it he'd drawn a surprisingly detailed sketch of a cowboy with a wide-brimmed hat standing next to a horse. He extended it toward John. For you, he whispered, his voice barely audible. John crouched down, his brown coat pulling around him on the plush Persian rug. He accepted the drawing as if it were a priceless land deed. He met the boy's serious blue eyes, his own eyes, and felt a profound, unbreakable connection that defied logic and biology. Thank you, Oscar, he said, his voice thick with unshed emotion. It's the best horse I've ever seen. That simple act of kindness, of connection, seemed to decide it for Jesse. Defensiveness in his posture softened. He looked at John, truly looked at him, for the first time that night. Tomorrow, he said, his voice quiet but firm, meeting John's gaze over the boys' heads. You can come by tomorrow afternoon. Darvin let out a sound of disgust. Jesse, you can't be serious. But Jesse ignored him, his focus entirely on John and the small boy who still stood near him, a faint red smudge on his cheek. John didn't care about Darvin or the party or the past 3 years of loneliness. He only cared about the promise of tomorrow. The next day, John stood before the door of Jesse's sleek Austin condo, feeling more nervous than he had before his first rodeo. He traded his coat and hat for a clean denim shirt and his best boots, but he still felt like a piece of the rugged country. Trespassing in the polished city, Jesse opened the door, his expression cautious. The apartment was immaculate, a minimalist space of glass, steel, and muted colors. It was beautiful, but it felt cold, a world away from the warm, chaotic clutter of the home they had once shared. The morning was a tentative dance of discovery. John sat on the floor, a giant in a land of miniature toys, and learned that Liam wanted to be an astronaut who rode a horse to the moon, and that Oscar could name every type of dinosaur and draw each one from memory. He showed them pictures of the foss on his phone, and Liam's eyes went wide with excitement, while Oscar quietly traced the shape of a horse on the screen with his finger. A part of John's heart, long dormant and walled off, began to crack open, letting in a light he hadn't realized he'd been missing. He was so engrossed in helping Liam build wobbly tower of blocks that he didn't hear Darwin arrive until his sharp, condescending voice cut through the air. "Well, look at this playing house, are we?" Jesse immediately stood. "Darwin, we talked about this." "We did," Darwin agreed, his gaze raking over John. "And I decided I don't like it. These boys need stability, Jesse, not some ghost from your past showing up to disrupt their lives." He turned his attention to John. "They have a father, they don't need you." "That's not your decision to make," John said, his voice dangerously quiet as he rose to his full height, towering over the other man. The tension in the room was electric. The boys fell silent, their playtime forgotten as they watched the adults with wide, uncertain eyes. Oscar suddenly moved closer to Jesse. "Isn't it?" Darwin took a step closer to Jesse, a possessive gesture. "Who's been here for the last 2 years? Who helps with their homework? Who takes them to the doctor? Certainly hasn't been you. Garrett, you forfeited any right to be in this room the day you let him walk away." Every word was a punch to John's gut because it was true. He had been absent. He had no claim here other than a face mirrored in the two children watching him, their expressions now tinged with fear. "That's enough," Jesse said, stepping between them. He looked at John, his own expression pained, conflicted. Maybe this was a mistake. It's too soon for them." Defeated, John nodded, the fight draining out of him. He crouched down to the boy's level. "I have to go now," he said, his voice strained. "But it was really good to meet you, Liam. And you, Oscar." As he stood to leave, Oscar silently pressed another drawing into his hand. John didn't look at it until he was back in the sterile quiet of his truck. The drawing was of 5 stick figures. On one side, 2 tall men, clearly Jesse and Darwin, held hands, with 2 small boys between them. On the other side of the page, all alone, stood a single tall man with a crudely drawn cowboy hat. John's heart broke. He rested his forehead against the steering wheel, the full weight of his past mistakes crashing down on him. Darwin was wrong. Those boys did need him, and he would be damned if he let anyone, including himself, stand in his way. He didn't give up. A week later, he sat on a tiny rickety chair in a school auditorium, his hat resting in his lap. It was the boys' Christmas pageant. After leaving a simple message for Jesse, "I'm not giving up. I'll be there for them," he had come not knowing if he'd be welcome. He saw Jesse and Darwin a few rows ahead. John's jaw tightened, but he chose a seat on the opposite aisle, determined not to cause a scene. When the curtains parted, a gaggle of 5-year-olds dressed as sheep, shepherds, and angels filled The stage, he spotted his boys. Immediately, Liam was a shepherd, enthusiastically and somewhat dangerously waving his staff, while Oscar, an angel with slightly crooked wings, stood quietly, his eyes scanning the crowd. Oscar's face lit up when he saw John, a slow, brilliant smile spreading across his face. He offered a small, shy wave. In that moment, John felt a surge of love so powerful it almost buckled him. Nothing else mattered after the show. Parents swarmed the stage. John hung back, but Liam spotted him. "You came," he shouted, launching himself across the auditorium floor and running full pelt into John's legs. John instinctively scooped him up in a hug, burying his face in the boy's dark, unruly hair, the small arms that wrapped tightly around his neck felt more real and grounding than anything he'd held in years. Oscar followed more slowly, clutching his cardboard halo. "You saw my wings?" he asked softly, his blue eyes shining. "I did," John said, his voice thick with emotion as he knelt to be at eye level with him. "You were the best angel up there. You practically flew." Jesse approached, his expression unreadable, but the hard lines around his eyes had softened. Darvin stood a few feet behind, his face a thundercloud. "Thank you for coming," Jesse said quietly. It meant a lot to them." "I meant what I said," John replied, his gaze fixed on the boys. "I'm not going anywhere." That evening, John showed up at Jesse's condo unannounced. When Jesse opened the door, John didn't wait for an invitation. He laid out a folder on the sleek coffee table. Not legal threats, but a proposal, a detailed schedule for visits, a plan for holidays, a trust fund he'd already set up for each boy's education, an offer to contribute to their daily lives. He spoke of the ranch, of teaching them to ride, of the open space where they could run free. "Jesse, I know I messed up," he confessed, his voice raw with sincerity. "I was a coward. I hid from the world and I hid from my own heart. I shut you out. And I am so sorry, but seeing those boys, it was like waking up after years of being asleep. They deserve to fathers who love them. Please don't shut me out now." Before Jesse could answer, Darvin came out of the bedroom dressed to go out. "What is he still doing here?" "Jesse, I told you to handle this." "I am handling it," Jesse said, standing up. He held up the papers John had brought. "John wants to be in their lives, Darvin. Properly as their father." Darvin laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "It's a ploy. He's trying to get back to you by using those kids. He doesn't care about them." "Is that what you think?" John asked, his voice calm but laced with steel. "Or are you just scared that if Jesse finally has a choice, a real choice, he won't choose you?" The truth of the statement hung in the air, sharp and heavy. Darvin's face darkened with rage. He turned to Jesse, his voice cold. "It's me or him. You can't have us both. Choose." Jesse looked at Darvin, the man who represented his new, polished, controlled life. Then his gaze shifted to John, the rugged, earnest man who was the mirror image of his sons. The man who had broken his heart, but had also just laid his own heart bare on the coffee table. He looked toward the boys' bedroom where two little boys slept, oblivious to the fact that their Future was being decided. He took a deep breath in for the first time in a long time he looked completely sure of himself. Then it's not you, Darwin. The 6 months that followed were a whirlwind of discovery and healing. The sleek Austin condo was traded for a sprawling, comfortable house in a green suburb, neutral ground with a yard big enough for two energetic boys and a dog they named Tommy. John split his time between the ranch and the city, seamlessly weaving his old life into his new one. He taught the boys how to properly groom a horse, and in turn, they taught him the surprisingly complex backstories of every superhero in the universe. The awkwardness between him and Jesse slowly melted away, eroded by the daily realities of co-parenting. They navigated skin knees, parent-teacher conferences, and Liam's sudden insistence on eating only blue food. They fell into a rhythm, sharing school pickups, bedtime stories, and quiet cups of coffee after the boys were asleep. They started talking again, really. Talking not about the pain of their past, but about the hopes for their future, the boys' future. One crisp autumn evening, they were sitting on the back porch watching Liam and Oscar attempting to build a treehouse with more enthusiasm than engineering skill. The sound of their laughter, free and joyous, filled the cooling air. There. Thriving, Jesse said, a soft, genuine smile on his face. All of them. We're a good team, John replied, his gaze meeting Jesse's over the rim of his coffee mug. An unspoken understanding passed between them, a current of emotion that had been building for months. This wasn't just about the boys anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. Come home with me, Jesse, John said. Suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could second guesses them. Jesse turned, surprise evident in his expression. What, to the ranch, John clarified, his voice earnest. Not just for a visit, for good. This house is great, but that's our home. I want us to be there together, a real family under one roof. Jesse hesitated, searching his face. John, what we have now, it's working, it's perfect. I don't want to mess it up by trying to be something we're not anymore. This won't mess it up, John insisted, reaching across the small table to take Jesse's hand. His own was calloused and rough against Jesse's smooth skin, a familiar contrast that sent a jolt through them both. When we were married before, I was so focused on building an empire of dirt and horses, a legacy. I didn't know how to make room for you in it. You deserved better than to be second place to a piece of land. We were both young, Jesse said softly, his thumb tracing a line over John's knuckles. I didn't know how to compete with your ambition. You shouldn't have had to, John replied, his voice thick with emotion. The boys showed me what a real legacy is. It's not about what you leave behind. It's about who you raise up. But I'm not asking because of them. I'm asking because these months with you have reminded me why I fell in love with you in the first place. Your strength, your kindness, the way you still look at me sometimes when you think I'm not looking. Jesse's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. You've changed for the better, I hope, John said with a small, hopeful smile. Jesse glanced at their Sons now engaged in a mock sword fight. With fallen branches, then back at John. The man before him was indeed transformed. His ambition was still there, but it was tempered by wisdom. His fierce drive now channeled into fatherhood and a second chance at the love he'd almost lost forever. Yes, Jesse whispered, squeezing his hand. Let's go home. Let's be a family, a real one in, as their sons abandoned their game and burst onto the porch. Chattering about their adventures, John pulled Jesse close, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. He finally understood that true wealth had nothing to do with accurate age or prize-winning horses. It had everything to do with love, forgiveness, and the beautiful, chaotic, perfect reality of family. Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe to our channel.